The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs Ascending. This isn't just a podcast. This is a call to action for all entrepreneurs who are tired of seeing their businesses and communities suffer while big business continues to grow by the billions. We challenge you to apply the content of our time together to create businesses that your clients can't resist, your employees love to work for, and your communities can depend on. Now is the time for Entrepreneurs Ascending. Yes, now is the time for Entrepreneurs Ascending, and we have a great show for you today. We always have a great show, or at least we really try hard. So we have a great show with you for you today. It's one of these topics that a lot of business owners just kind of like put off. You don't want to think about it. I mean, it's some people kind of think it's kind of a maybe somewhat of a morbid topic a little bit, but really it can be really celebrating, I think, the legacy that you're building, and that's around estate planning for business. We've got an estate planning attorney, Curtis Bailey. He's a professional in this. He's been doing it for years and years and years. And so he's going to share with us today what are the biggest mistakes business owners are making when creating an estate plan or avoiding creating an estate plan. And why is this so important? Well, I think we're going to dig into this, but just kind of on the surface, again, going back to this idea that you've created a legacy, or you're building and creating a legacy, right? That's one of the big motivators for a lot of entrepreneurs. You've built something great. Why leave it to chance and what's going to happen to it? You know, whether or not you have family to pass it on to, or maybe there's a charity that you want it to go to, that it's good to take some time and think about, like, what is going to live on after I'm gone. And so we're going to go ahead and roll the sponsorship, and then we're going to get in and we're going to meet Curtis. He's going to share a little bit about his journey as an entrepreneur and as an attorney. And then in the second half, we're going to dig into those questions of, like, what are those mistakes, and why do people make them, and how do we fix them? So go ahead, Jason. Let's hit the sponsorship. Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flora, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com. All right, and we are here with Mr. Bailey. So wonderful to have you here today, sir.
Thank you, Matt. It is an honor to be here. And please don't call me Mister.
This is whatever floats your boat.
Right.
All right, Curtis, thank you so much. So I teased a little bit about estate planning and what it's about, but can you tell the audience a little bit more about what you do in that realm?
Sure. Estate planning is kind of one of those terms that has been around for quite some time, and I'm not really sure it conveys exactly what we do in that realm, but the tag has stuck, so there it is. On a day-to-day basis, I work with individuals and families of all shapes and sizes to ensure that they've got some preparations in place for that ultimate event that we all know is coming. We just don't know when. That's passing. But also we talk about making sure that you're prepared and protected while you're alive. And so we spend a significant amount of time talking about documents that we can put in place that will provide some protection for you and your loved ones while you're alive. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. And then as a subset of that, I really focus on working with business owners to make sure that not only that is in place, but your business plans and preparations are in place as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm just curious, so why is it important that business plans are in place to help your estate plan? Like how does that play a role?
Sure. They're intimately connected. A generation or two ago, our parents and grandparents, the largest asset in an individual's estate was usually the home. It was real estate
Hmm.
of some kind. I'm a farm kid and come from farm country, and so family farms were the largest asset. Now, quite frankly, in increasing numbers, the largest asset in a person's estate is their business. And
Hmm.
so, depending on the structure that the entrepreneur has chosen to do business in, has a massive impact on whether it will live beyond the life of the owner, and thus the linkage between the estate plan for the individual and the business plan for the business is critical.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that we'll dig into more of that here in the second half. But I think it's important to kind of share your journey. A lot of people might be out there going through some similar steps along the way, maybe running into some similar challenges, and it's always good to hear, um, what other folks have gone through. So, what? How long have you been in law, in that whole industry, in that profession?
So I've been a practicing attorney for 30 years now,
Hmm.
and but time flies. I'll tell you that. Nonetheless, just a bit about me. As I mentioned earlier, I was a farm kid. I grew up
Yeah.
in North Central Missouri and went to law school at the University of Missouri in Columbia.
Okay. I'm just curious. On the
Graduate.
farm, cows, chickens, the whole
Uh,
gambit, goats.
yes, no, yes.
Okay.
Had cows, had pigs, had goats, had rabbits.
Okay. So some of your work ethic came from milking the cows every morning. Is that?
Well, I tell you, it was particularly it's a cold winter's day today, and getting up quite early in the morning, chopping ice to make sure that the cows had fresh water to drink. So, yeah, I think that's where a lot of the work ethic comes from, and
Mhm.
perseverance. It seems kind of a mundane day-to-day routine, but it's important.
Right, right, right. Well, I think that builds a huge discipline. The mundane is really kind of what discipline is about. So,
That's
uh,
exactly right. That's
yeah.
exactly right. And so after I graduated law school, I came to St. Louis, and
Mhm.
I worked in downtown St. Louis at a law firm. Kind of did the typical young lawyer thing, which is you work for a large firm for a while
Mhm.
and pay off some student loan debt. And I ended up then moving to a firm in Clayton, Missouri, out in St.
Mhm.
Louis County. Worked there for a couple years, and I met my current wife, who resided in Illinois, and she convinced me that I would like to move to Illinois, and so I did. And in 1996, I joined a law practice, became a partner there. Was focused really exclusively on corporate litigation work,
Mhm.
and did some transactional things like estate planning along the way. And 12 years ago, decided it was time to sort of come off the road, if you will. I was traveling all over the country trying lawsuits in courtrooms, and
Mhm.
decided I wanted for the next phase to transition into more home-based transactional practice, and ended up joining a law school classmate of mine, and we've been working together. There's three attorneys in our practice total. I am what we call of counsel, which means I'm not a partner in a firm, but I am an independent contractor,
Mhm.
and it works extremely well. And so that's what I've been doing in the law. And I do have a bit of a side passion in wine, and my wife and I actually owned and operated a, retail wine store in Edwardsville, Illinois, for 3 years. So kind of have a bit of an entrepreneurial thing apart from the law. So
That's fun. So
yeah,
now, do you guys still do anything with the wine, or is that?
we do not. As it goes, we were renting space for our store, and the landlord decided that he wanted to do something different with the space.
Mm.
And about 2 weeks before the end of the term of our lease, after we thought we had an extension negotiated, he decided he wanted to do something different. At that point, it was just a bit, the timing was too tight for us to really pivot and find another space.
Yeah.
And The space we were in was very unique. It was an incredibly old building, had kind of that aura about it, and we couldn't
Mm.
find a space that was similar. So we decided to end the journey at that point.
Yeah. Wow. So I guess just looking back on that, I'm sure that there's some lessons to be shared with other
Yeah.
folks to kind of help them. What do you feel is like kind of your biggest takeaway that you might share with somebody who's thinking about a similar venture?
I think the biggest takeaway, and something I try to communicate to all of my entrepreneur clients, is before you get into the project, make sure you know your numbers. And that's a
Mm.
very technical thing, right? It's not sort of,
Yeah.
the choir singing in the background kind of
Hmm.
advice. But I will tell you, from a practical standpoint, it's incredibly important to know that going in, and making sure you have sufficient capital
Hmm.
before you start the project, because you will encounter unexpected turbulence along the way, and you will have to either find an alternate source of funding or dig into your own pocket.
Hmm.
I think entrepreneurs are incredibly optimistic people, right? You cannot be a pessimist, I think, and to be an entrepreneur. And so
That's an
sometimes that
interesting, yeah.
optimism, though, can cloud judgment. And so
Hmm.
I do think you have to be a bit practical in your optimism, and make sure you've got a little extra cushion along the way. So,
What?
we found that out. But at the end of the day, you know what? Looking back on the experience, we wouldn't have changed it in any way.
Yeah.
We met incredible people. The memories we take away from it are priceless and irreplaceable. And so that's what I've got.
That's no, that
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. I would imagine, yeah, the wine business would be fairly, I guess, not as capitally intensive as maybe the RV business, but it's still pretty capitally intensive.
Here's what anybody out there that wants to get into wine sales, alcohol sales in general, it's incredibly
Hmm.
regulated. Okay,
Yeah.
and so primarily at the state level, but there are federal restrictions on
Mm.
what can be sold directly to the consumer, what has to go through a retail
Hmm.
establishment, which means it has to go through a wholesale establishment. And so there are, and everybody gets their cut at that level, right? And
Hmm.
so ultimately, at the end of the day, um, the retail side of alcohol is not as lucrative as you might think it is. If you go to a restaurant and order a bottle of wine, there's a very nice markup there. When you buy
Hmm.
it at retail, it's not that big of a markup. So anyway, that's why
Yeah.
I say it's incredibly important to know your industry that you're getting
Y-
into and how
Yeah.
the numbers work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a huge takeaway for folks. So,
Yeah.
going back to estate planning, and when did you really like what was that moment, that life event where you're like, estate planning?
About 10 years into my practice, and again, I was incredibly busy as a litigator, thinking courtrooms and strategy and things like that.
Hmm.
And my clients were all corporate-based clients. And so one day I received a phone call from one of my good clients and said, my mom is getting ready to need to go into a nursing home. and
Mm.
I need some help navigating it. Can you help me? And I said, well, it's not something I do on a day-to-day basis, but I'm willing to take a look into it and see if I can help. And as I got into it, I really it's going to sound strange to say, but I enjoyed the process, right? It was something
Yeah.
new, it was something different for me professionally. Obviously, I had taken a class. Everybody tends in law school to take a class on estates because it's typically on every state's bar exam. So
Yeah.
have some familiarity, but dug into it and really found that I enjoyed the process of helping people in that way,
Hmm.
as opposed to defending them or prosecuting in a courtroom. So did it. Think I must have done a pretty decent job because the client was happy, and I fielded some phone calls and some inquiries more and more as a result of that, and decided that I took more personal satisfaction away from helping people in that way than I did doing the litigation thing, which can be a zero sum kind of thing, right? You either win or you lose.
Hmm.
And so, like I said, that was about 10 years into my practice, so about 20 years ago. And then slowly over time did more and more of it, and
Hmm.
approached my partners at the time about sort of me changing course, but it didn't fit with the current firm. So we parted, and then I joined my law school classmate who was already doing this kind of work. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So you found out there wasn't a fit where you were at at the time, and you were a partner at that
I
firm,
was.
right?
Yeah, I
And
was.
yeah, wow. So
So
that must have been
it
yeah,
obviously when you're a partner, it's kind of like a marriage. You
right.
have to you have to divide the assets.
Yeah.
Fortunately, you don't have to worry about custody, but nonetheless, we worked it out and parted ways, and I moved on. So it
Hmm.
happens.
Looking back at that partnership, because those are that's one of the things that when people talk about, I'm like, well, just let's take a second to think about this because I love what you said there. It's like a marriage. It's like a marriage without the love, right?
Mm,
I mean, maybe
right,
some brotherly love or like human,
right.
just human to human love, but like so what was like the biggest thing that you learned about being in a partnership that you would tell somebody who's thinking about getting into a partnership? Whoa, think about this first.
That's a great question, and it's a topic that I uh, talk with clients about all the time.
Yeah,
And
I
that
imagine.
is number one, assume that there will be a disagreement somewhere
Mm,
along the way. That's just human nature. Anytime you're in business with someone other than yourself, and I include in that category your spouse, children, your brother-in-law, your best friend, there's going to be a problem that comes along, right? And it may be
uh-huh.
small or it could be big. I don't know, but that's just human nature that there will be disagreements. And I think the best thing that you can do is to have a written document in place that you can fall back on. So
Mm,
to take it back to the family context, it's a prenup. Okay, it's a
okay,
prenuptial
yeah,
agreement before you start that says, "Here's how we agree that we're going to handle certain situations." Okay.
yeah.
Now, if we can agree otherwise, great, super, right? That's perfect. But if we can't, then we've got this written document that spells out how we're going to deal with it. We negotiated it up front, so it might not ultimately be the solution at the time that we want, but it is what we negotiated going in, and it will make life a lot easier. Because if you don't have that, then you're just inviting issues, I think. So.
Hmm.
Yeah, and again, that's not a choir singing in the background kind of topic, but it's important. Very important.
There's always going to be a disagreement. I
Always.
mean, how often do you disagree with yourself a day later? So,
Yeah.
right, like,
Yeah,
it's obviously gonna.
absolutely. I mean, it's the way it is. And I think if you go into the experience with your eyes open, knowing that
Mhm.
you'll deal with it far better.
That's a great insight. So, what do you feel? And we'll pivot here in a second. This might be maybe the last question before we do a sponsor and then get into the next part. But what do you feel is like your biggest triumph as an entrepreneur, being in business for yourself, looking back all the years?
Very interesting question because, I said entrepreneurs tend to be optimistic people in general, but they don't, by and large, tend to be ones that celebrate their triumphs, right? It's
Yeah.
just kind of all part of the journey, and I'm no different. I will say that I think my biggest triumph is being able to work with my wife, doing
Mm.
something that we both enjoyed and we both loved. We worked extremely hard at it. We worked extremely hard together. We didn't always agree. Surprise, surprise. But looking back, we crafted an experience that generated for us lifelong friends, people we never met before, who came into our store, liked what we were doing, supported us, promoted us, and were sad when we left, and we're still friends with. That to me is the biggest triumph that I take away from my entrepreneurship journey, apart from the law. So that's sort of what I take away from it. On the law side, I'm incredibly blessed to help people on a daily basis in something that I view as important. And,
Hmm.
litigation's important and all those kinds of things. But again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a zero sum affair. And so I take away a lot of personal satisfaction helping folks who may be in times of distress, and when they're coming to me, or at least if they're not, I can help them be prepared for what could be a time of distress, and I take a lot of satisfaction away from that.
Yeah. So I think it's a huge triumph that not only did you get to do something
Yeah.
awesome with your wife, entrepreneurial venture that you both love, but you also survived that
Yes,
together. I
we
think
did.
is
We did. No doubt. Oh, I mean, life is hard enough without, as a married couple, without in, some kind of stress on top of that. But we look back, we laugh,
yeah.
and we toast each other and say we had fun.
Hmm. With the 30 or 40 cases of wine that you still have in your basement, is that
You know what? We ended up selling every bottle of wine we
wow?
had, so which is good,
That's good.
right?
Yeah. 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 You're able to
Because that
liquidate your
inventory has a carrying cost associated with it.
right.
No, I'm
Right.
kidding, but no. But yeah, we sold every bottle we had. But hey, there you go.
Yeah, you're able to liquidate your assets, right?
That's
So
right.
that's good.
That's right.
Can't whine about that. All
Ooh,
right. Sorry, done with the dad jokes.
pun
All
intended.
right. All right. Well, we're going to switch to the sponsor here for about 30-second quick break, and take a breather, and then we're going to get into what are some of those biggest mistakes that business owners make around the whole like estate planning thing. So we'll be right back. Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flora, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com. Hello, and we are back, and we're here with Curtis Bailey. He is an estate planning professional, attorney, maybe even, and he loves to work with entrepreneurs. And why is it specifically, again, that you love to work with entrepreneurs? What is it about that unique position that entrepreneurs that are in?
Well, as I mentioned in the first half, entrepreneurs are an optimistic bunch by nature. And so given the choice of working with an optimist or a pessimist, I always prefer to work with an optimist. No, but it's always, I think, professionally interesting and fun for me to work with people who have an idea and they want help bringing that idea to fruition, right? I feel my job is to help facilitate that, not to quash somebody's dreams, but to figure out a way to make it happen. And so that's why I would like working with entrepreneurs.
Thank you for the segue, because you've mentioned the optimism thing a couple of times, and there was that question lurking in the back of my brain, and I think it leads well into this conversation. So that optimism is awesome, but sometimes it can like when is that optimism then just like hard-headedness?
Very good point. Very good point. And that's why I view my job in helping facilitate to also provide some maybe tapping of the brakes along the way.
Yeah,
Um,
a little tough love.
Right. Yeah, sometimes. And so here's, the common mantra, right? Offense is important, but defense wins championships. And so I think my job is to share my perspective and my knowledge, obviously, of the law and things of that nature to help guide an entrepreneur into making better decisions maybe than they would otherwise. If they didn't have that perspective or they didn't have that knowledge, they might not make as good a decision as if they had it. So, look, it's not my project, it's not my business, it's not my life, but I'm there to kind of share the experience. And I have enough gray hair now that I've got some experience. Experience comes from the lows, right? And the challenges more so sometimes than the triumphs and the highs. So I just think I'm here to help guide them along. And I want them to be successful. I want everybody that comes into my office as an entrepreneur to be successful. But I also know that 80% of new businesses fail, and they certainly don't make it from the first generation to the second generation. And even those that make it to the second generation, 80% of those don't make it to a third generation. So I'm just trying to help people maybe maximize their opportunity to be successful.
So when we're looking at estate planning, what would you say are those top 3 issues that just keep rearing their ugly little heads popping out at you?
Well, number one, should be no surprise, people don't do it. Simply don't think about it. And as a famous rock band once said, when you fail to choose, you still have made a choice. And they leave those kinds of issues up to I don't want to say chance, but they leave it in the hands of the state, and the state has to give you some sort of plan, right? If you don't have one otherwise, and oftentimes it's not the way you would do it. So failing to address it is the number one biggest mistake. The second mistake is not ensuring that you've got a plan in place while you're still alive, but should you become disabled or incapacitated for a short period of time, what's going to happen, right? How's your business going to survive What sort of plan do you have in place?
But we're entrepreneurs. We're
You're bulletproof.
unstoppable. Yeah.
Yep, you're bulletproof. You're invincible. Yeah, bad things happen, but they're not going to happen to me.
Right.
So that's where you have to sometimes temper the optimism a little bit, and
Mhm.
just point out the fact that bad things happen to good people every day, and be thankful if they don't happen to you, but be prepared if they do.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that those really are the two things. And really from there, it can kind of get a bit specific and technical, and that might be um, not critically evaluating, say, your children. If you want to pass your business on to your child,
Mm.
are they the right choice? Bottom line, that can be some difficult conversations to have,
Yeah.
but they're necessary, because here's the thing: I always put the business first and foremost, and I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're going into business, you have to put the business first. Um,
Mhm.
how are you going to maximize success? How are you going to pass it on if that's the plan? Because let's face it, and you know this as well, Matt, in what you do on a day-to-day basis. Really, what a lot of entrepreneurs have is a job. They've just switched bosses
Right.
from a company that they used to work for to themselves, or ultimately their clients, and so they just have a job. They don't have a business, and so when you have a business, you have to look at it differently, and that's where these planning and preparation things come into play, I think.
Mhm. So put the business first is a big part of that. Um, yeah, because a lot of people I do see, and we're kind of getting into number three before number one too
Yeah,
deeply, I
that's all
guess.
right.
But
Yeah.
but that's an interesting point that I have seen play out in some unfortunate ways, that
Mm.
people try to pass it on to somebody who's not ready, or they don't, you know, they don't take the time to try to coach somebody into it. There's just kind of this assumption that it's going to happen.
Yeah, and this is huge. Well, as I told you, I'm from farm country, and
Hmm.
so this is a common and recurring issue with family farms. Um,
Yeah.
and family-owned businesses in general. Obviously, family comes first, right?
Hmm.
Is and always should. But
Hmm.
when you're in business together, you have to compartmentalize a little bit, and you have to set it aside,
Hmm.
and you have to think about what is best for the business, um, irrespective of the family relationships. And
Hmm.
the best family-owned businesses that I have observed over my career, that I've worked with, have non-family folks in positions of leadership, and the whole bit. So it's not
Hmm.
just the family; it's the family plus outside people, outside advisors. Those are
Hmm.
the family businesses that survive and thrive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let's circle back around to number one. So avoiding it. Do you think that's coming often from a place of just not knowing or ignorance, or is it more so just wanting to avoid thinking about it? Is it coming from a place of just too busy? I'll do it later, or where do you see?
Um, I would say all of those things. I guess overall, it's just failing to recognize the importance of it.
Hmm.
Again, we're all offensive minded people, right? We have to get out there and go to work and do and do and do, and we don't think about defense nearly as much as we should, in many different contexts, whether it's our personal health, or our business. And so I think people get so busy running their business that they fail to work on their business. And in my context, that means working on your personal life as well. A very interesting observation. We were still in the midst of this COVID issue, and when COVID first started in February of 2020, and then March rolled around, and we started getting into shutdowns and lockdowns and things of that nature, I, like every other business owner, was like, well, how's this going to impact me? Right? Are people going
Mm-hmm.
to still want to come to my office? Are they going to still want to do it? And I'll be honest, I have been busier since COVID, not because of COVID. Nobody's come to me and said, well, with COVID, I want to do this. But what has
Mm-hmm.
happened is people in the lockdowns and the shutdowns had time. All right.
Mm-hmm.
They're now at home, and maybe they're at home with their spouse, and they have thought, hey, now we've got some time to devote to this and do it. And so I found that people had time because they were forced to have time to sort of get away from the business and actually work on things like this. So I
Mm-hmm.
think people just get so busy doing, and they feel like they're pushing the ball or advancing the ball, that they don't think about what happens if I can't do this, and why
Yeah.
should I take the time? Why should I spend the money on creating a plan? Or, well, we know it's going to happen, death, but particularly disability and other things, right? That
Yeah.
may or may not happen.
Yeah. So you think that there's time factor with COVID? Was
Right.
it the fact that people might have had to kind of consider their own mortality?
I maybe
Yeah.
people, most people won't say that, right, outright. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think to a certain sense, you had to start really thinking, and particularly for those of us of a certain age, who are getting older, and perhaps had some friends or colleagues or acquaintances that passed because of COVID. I think that has to be a certain thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you that before COVID, and still even after to this day, I find people become incredibly motivated to do their own personal estate planning when they have to deal with the aftermath of the passing of a parent. All of
Yeah.
a sudden, they see in practice why it's important to have a plan in place
Mm-hmm.
and have some preparations. And that's been a constant from day one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just an interesting observation.
Yeah. I know when my grandfather passed away, my father was, talking more and more about it. Like, hey, this is where our paperwork is, and this is
Right.
um, so you definitely have seen that firsthand as well.
Yeah.
Um, just yeah, that's a good
It's
point.
very important.
Yeah.
Again, it's not, look, it's not a fun topic per se, right? Where do you want your things to go when you pass, and who do you want to be in charge of making that happen?
Yeah.
But um, if you make the first step, I'm not a jokester, and I don't make jokes about it, but we'll approach it gingerly and but honestly and directly, and try to have a little fun along the way. So
Well, if you're thinking about it in terms of the legacy that you're building, kind of like
okay.
I said in the intro, can it be a little bit more exciting? Like, hey,
Yeah,
this is I wanted to build a legacy. I wanted to be intentional. That's why I built a business, and I was intentional about building the business. I need to be intentional about how this legacy lives on and continues to impact the world.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
if an entrepreneur can bring the same optimism that they brought to the table when they started their business to how they want the story to end or continue after they pass, it can be an incredibly positive and exciting thing.
Yeah.
Really, you
Yeah.
know, um, it's all wrapped up obviously into to how each individual views passing and their death.
Right.
Is it a horrible, morbid thing that we want to avoid, or is it something that we can turn into a positive that will have an impact beyond our physical life? And so
Yeah.
those are the folks that tend to really dig in. They roll up their sleeves and they get into it. So
Oh yeah, I kind of think it's kind of like the difference between a funeral. Do you want to have a funeral or do you want to have a celebration of life?
right, absolutely, no doubt about it. No
Yeah.
doubt about it.
Like, hey,
Um,
want to celebrate my life when I'm dead and gone. Have a
yeah.
party, have fun, talk about the good times. Don't be sad. Let's celebrate.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And most do turn into a celebration of life
Mm-hmm.
afterwards. So
Mm-hmm.
whether you
Exactly.
call it that or not, I think when people go through it, that's just again human nature too.
Yeah.
Um, you want to avoid the pain, and so the quicker we can turn that funeral into a celebration, the better.
So on that point, what is an example of when it was forgotten about, not done, not taken care of, and so it ended up going kind of the opposite way? Like, so it had to go through probate, or somebody stepped up and said, "No, I should be getting this." And then there was a big fight, and then it actually broke a family. You build this legacy, you're trying to do it for your family, and then you don't do the estate planning, you don't do the planning and the intentionality of afterwards, and then it breaks things. Have you ever seen that?
Oh wait. Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. So here's typically the scenario, right? I can't really talk about specifics, but I
Sure.
can talk
Sure.
about sort of an exemplar scenario. Okay,
Yeah,
family-owned
definitely.
business, and we can put it in the farm world, or we can put it in any sort of setting.
hmm
Uh, but there are typically in family-owned businesses, there are the generation that started it. Then
hmm
there's the next generation.
Yeah.
And in that generation, there might be one or more that are active in the
hmm
business and want to continue on. And there typically are one or more that have no interest in it whatsoever, right?
hmm
Uh,
Right.
but mom and or dad want to treat all of their children fairly, okay? But they don't put a plan in place. They don't have the proper documents in place. They don't have assets titled in the correct way. They just don't have a plan, or if they have a plan, it's old. It hasn't been updated. It hasn't been changed, and the current reality doesn't fit the plan. So, mom and or dad pass on, and if they don't have a plan, we're in court. Okay, probate court is something to be avoided. Um, Even though I, as a lawyer, and I'll be very candid with clients, I make a lot more money personally probating estates than I do drafting plans to keep people out of it. But the point of the matter is that I try to keep people out of the courthouse because that's not where you want these things to end up
Yeah.
if you can avoid it. And so if they don't have a plan, we're in probate court, and here's where the family rivalries start, right? And it might be something that has been simmering for many, many years. Dad always liked you more, or whatever.
Mm.
But now the kids have lawyered up and they're fighting over a business. It's now a public process. Okay. Probate court is
Mm.
public. Anybody can walk in off the street and see what you have and where it's going or what's going on. And a business in that context loses value like a new car being driven off the lot for the first time. Okay.
Wow.
Because now every competitor, every person who might be interested in it knows it's a distressed sale. It will never be a fair market value sort of transaction. So you'll usually have one faction of the family that wants to sell it so that they can take their money and go to the islands, and then you've got the folks that want to keep it and build it, and it's very hard to reconcile that in an appropriate way.
hmm
So that's kind of the worst case scenario, and that's what we try to avoid at all
Yeah.
costs is to keep it out of the courthouse.
Yeah. Yeah. I I'd have to say that if I would think that that's a very conservative guess of the car driving off the lot in terms of that effect. I mean,
Sure. Sure.
especially how distressed it is.
Mhm.
But if everybody can immediately look into the books, and then there's all this infighting, uh, and it would make a business almost unsellable in a lot of cases, I would bet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's just very few businesses will survive that sort of thing.
Mm.
And those that do are going to be much different and much smaller. So
Yeah.
on the flip side of that, and I know we don't have much time left, but on the
Yeah.
flip side of that, I've got a client I'm working with that's in their 6th generation. They started their business right after the Civil War, and they're in 6 generations, and they get together consistently and often to tweak, talk, and update. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a takeaway too. Don't just put a plan in place and walk away from it. Look at it, tweak it, update it.
Okay. So the top 3 things were: don't avoid it. Go ahead and do it. Celebrate your life.
Yep.
Take that tenacity of being intentional and being optimistic, and do that so that your business can live on as a legacy. Make sure there's a plan for if you're incapacitated.
Right.
So you might not pass away, but you might be incapacitated. And then really evaluate who and how you're passing it on to. Who's going to be leading it? Is there anybody who's not in the family who might have that outside perspective? So I appreciate those are 3 huge points. So if you're an entrepreneur out there, which you probably are if you're listening to this, how do they get a hold of you, somebody like you, Curtis, or how do they get a hold of you to talk about their options?
Yeah, sure. So I am licensed to practice law in Missouri and Illinois.
Okay.
We're still regulated by each state when it
Hmm.
comes to what we can do, but I'm certainly open and available for general inquiries as well. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. Search for Curtis Bailey at Huffman Law Offices. My email address is cbailey@huffmanlawoffices.com. Happy to respond and try to help anyone that I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today. And again, if you're an entrepreneur, don't put it off. If you're anybody, you really don't put it off. But especially as an entrepreneur, work hard, celebrate your legacy, celebrate your life, and put that plan together. So thanks again. We'll see you
Thanks,
next
Matt.
time.
Take care.
Thank you for being with us today. But now is the time to put what we talked about into practice. Remember, your family, employees, and community are depending on you to rise up and win. The great news is you're not alone. You're part of a resurgence of entrepreneurs who are ready to take their business, life, and impact to the next level, and we're going to do it together. This show is powered by Time for Success, where we help business owners every day who want more freedom and wealth while building a legacy of positive impact. Please follow Time for Success on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube for more helpful strategies and tools for creating the business and life of your dreams.